methodologies that are employed. So we just want to get what is saliently coming from Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Kenya. So that's going to help us save a bit of time. And that time that we save, like we said yesterday, we need to also get an opportunity to interact with the city, Dakar. But also if you look at the program, there's a component of the program that we had planned and would like to move that online. That's the program that was supposed to start taking place today for the preparation of the qualitative phase. I would like to invite our partners to take advantage of, all these issues that are emerging here. I think they're going to help us to inform how we interpret the results. And according to the few conversations I've had, I think that's where the uniqueness is going to come out, because it looks like the results cuts across and they look the same. But then there are those salient features that emerge from each and every country that we need to take advantage of, but also to implement them in our qualitative phase of the study. So it means that the part that was supposed to take place in the qualitative study is going to be scrapped off, and we will move it online. I think our communication will be done immediately after here, so that we know when that's going to take place with partners. But if our stakeholders who are here are still available, I think a common mailer is going to be sent out, and we'll invite you as well, because you're already part and parcel of this community. Another thing that we'd like to communicate in a slight change, there's a critical component of the project which is monitoring the service providers to help us do a midterm evaluation of the project. Despite that we're in the 4th year of the project, majority of the first year and the second year were preparatory years. And so most of the work took place in the 3rd year, and we are now going to evaluate what has taken place up to now. And I think that's going to take place between now and April. So one of the components of that is that we are requesting partners and all stakeholders that they will be coming to you starting today, because they will introduce themselves, they will introduce what they are doing. They are going to make a presentation later to begin taking data from you so that they can evaluate the whole process. A critical component of that is evaluating the process of doing this work to help us inform how the end-term evaluation is going to be. So my team for evaluation, if you don't mind, Patricia, just say hi, and Tamari, they are there. Yeah, okay. So they will interact with you individually. We'll also call them later to do a presentation for us. So that is going to come and take place immediately after the regional validation has taken place for the East Africa. But I also want to implore us that when we break here for lunch, we shouldn't be able to come back. So we try as much as possible to do everything before we go for lunch. So we'll see how we can negotiate ourselves with the hotel team, how we can negotiate ourselves to get lunch a bit late, so that we finish here and go. Another component of the program is Joseph will be organizing some appreciation for the team, for everyone who came here, but we'll communicate it, in person to a large extent, and they'll be setting a camp out there to call you so that it does its own appreciation, and then you come back to the room, so we don't interrupt the flow of the conversations. Yesterday we moved, part of the program we were supposed to be addressed by the director in the Ministry of Youth. I've been informed that the director is not here yet, but we just want to remain agile so that when the director comes here, we see how to slot the director in, because still they're the host and they're a critical component of this program. So then we welcome the director, and then we continue with our program. So at this juncture, I hope we are all ready for the day. I would like to invite Professor Mati, the Deputy Director at CAPSI, to give us the opening remarks, and then straight away we will go into the program. Thank you, and welcome.
Good morning. I don't have much energy. I did not eat last night. I hope you all got your dinner. Mine became a huge hullabaloo, and I decided to postpone. Yeah? You can hear me? Okay. No, I'm saying I hope you had a good night. Despite, I know there were a lot of issues last night with the kitchen, which, given the numbers and everything else, there's no logic from where I come from why things needed to run the way they did, but that's me. And to donate my, and to prioritize my sleep over having to wait for 5 hours for food. But anyway, we had an interesting day yesterday, which in so many ways I think laid the background for most of the things that we were meant to be doing. Just give me a moment. Yesterday we heard about what's coming out from the various countries. The presentations were quote-unquote regionally organized in terms of countries in each region presenting their own findings. But I think out of the two regions that have already presented, we can already start to see certain things happening. My argument would be, and I stand to be corrected, that the things that are coming out is definitely there is a huge unemployment, or there is a youth employment crisis across the African continent. Some parts of the continent seem to be having a little bit more to bear in this particular regard, with statistics in South Africa pointing to close to even 50+ percent. If you count those that forgiven up on the ability to find work. In the absence of that, it's way about 40-something% for those that are still actively looking for work. To countries like Cote d'Ivoire, which seems like there's quite a lot that's been happening in terms of government efforts. At the same time, some of the findings that, or the broader trends that I was able to observe has to do with, I think all our partners have went for the low-hanging fruits in terms of telling the story about what's happening in terms of non-profit sector's contributions, either in terms of direct jobs, in terms of enablers for young people to get jobs, either through training, through seeding, and many of the other elements. Be that as it may, I think there is a critical component which I would urge each and every partner to look at. This particular project, in as much as broader perspectives are important, I think there is as much as they may be protected by international law, and sometimes some of the countries may be doing quite a lot, we don't see sufficient attention paid in these reports to actually tell us what's happening. And even if they are mentioned, they are almost mentioned in passing. So I would urge the country research teams, together with our leads, to pay attention to that. The data is already there, so I think it's a matter of how we package that. We also know that when we talk about, let's say, women, it's great to talk about women as marginalized. But as I was making a joke with one of my colleagues last night, when I look at her and I look at myself, I may be marginalized. Okay? Even though I'm not a woman. So let's not universalize the particular. By that I mean, can we try and get all the differentiations that are there so that when we are telling stories of real people. I know in quantitative terms that's not necessarily very easy, but we have an opportunity to be able to reflect a little bit more on specific categories of people. I think some of the things that have been given, for instance, is to segment the age categories between 15 and 35. It's huge. In some contexts, 35-year-olds are mothers of, and fathers of the 15-year-olds. Don't ask me what I was doing in my team, but that's a possibility. So let's do the segmentations. But we also know that, for instance, some of the other categories that this particular project looked at least at the conceptual level, and I can speak with authority on that because I was involved in the conception of the project. We're looking at, let's say, on women, we have teen mothers, for instance, those that in parts of our cultures look down upon because, and that sometimes you never give them other opportunities. What are nonprofits doing in this regard? In terms of enabling them get either jobs or provision of direct jobs and things like that. We have various other categories. So by this I mean, can we try and pay attention to a little bit more to those marginalized groups? Let's try and segment the data so that the stories that are coming out of this become useful for programming purposes. If there are no findings on these categories of groups, that's a finding on its own, because then it tells us that probably we are preaching to the converted, or we are targeting those that are already a lot is happening. And I'm saying that I'm also involved in corporate social investments type of studies, and one of the things that we find in most cases of countries is where companies are investing in the low-lying fruits, as I call them. It's education, it's health. Yet the more fundamental elements, for instance, in social justice, the root causes of either the inequality or the problems that we have remain untouched. Can we try to deepen the analysis and ensure that these particular elements are there? But I think from the presentations, my reading of this is we have very rich data that, and I see a lot of promise coming. Yesterday, and side conversations with some of you, especially those of us that are in the academic world, that I think this particular data offers huge opportunities over and beyond the publications that we're going to do as part of the official requirement for reporting purposes to the foundation, but also for ourselves, to perhaps having comparative analysis across various elements that would be useful in one form or another. For today, we're going to deepen these conversations again, or hear stories from, I think it's East Africa, and then we'll take that forward. And as Dr. Umas alluded to, there are a few other elements that are lined up from the evaluation team, but also conversations around next steps, especially in effecting the qualitative elements. I don't think I have anything else to add to that than to say that I wish all of us a productive day, and there the conversation continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for such a brief, welcoming remark for the day 2 of the conversations. So I think we just need to probably go straight to the program for the East African team to present to us. Like I said earlier, we're going to remain agile so that when the other team members, the other keynote speakers who are coming from Senegal, who were supposed to join us, also join, then we allow them the opportunity to, to join us. But I'll try as much as possible to see how we can control that so that we don't interfere with the program so much. All right. As we do that, so coming from yesterday, certainly, like I alluded to earlier, there are a lot of learnings that are already taking place. And because this is a validation, we are guided by certain questions that we need to see if they're being answered. If there are lapses, then we see how us together in the room, we can contribute to them being answered, because that's the final intent that we have, for this process. So, the first presenter from East Africa is going to be Professor Ter. But before that, I would like just to remind us, this is information that we have, the guiding validation questions. We really want to understand to what extent do these findings resonate with the realities of the specific country. In this case, this is going to be Kenya, but there's also going to be Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. And where do we see regional similarities? Those are the commonalities that I was talking about earlier, and the uniqueness that perhaps we need to take into account when we are doing the interpretation of these results. Another one, are there results that seem surprising? Like Professor Marty is saying, if there are no results or there are no findings, it's still a finding. Or inconsistent with lived realities. In economics, we call them a priori. Are we interpreting these patterns correctly? Based on the objectives of the project, what important contextual dynamics does the quantitative data not fully capture at the country level? And again, what key policy and program message are emerging, for individual countries, and which of these can be elevated to the regional level? The second last one is, where would qualitative research or case studies be useful in deepening these understandings? What are the pockets of the pockets that are not fully answered? We need to get to the point that we can properly answer them in the qualitative phase. So based on this dialogue, which is going to be the end after the presentation, what must be emphasized in the country and synthesis report? Because as you may be aware or understand, we are going to have the general synthesis report of the 17 countries involved, but also at the regional level synthesis report. And then I believe that those of us from East Africa at the moment, we're going to see how we can, how can we emphasize on the final, synthesis report from the conversations we're going to have here. So please allow me to invite Professor Ismail Atea to do a presentation for Kenya. We hope Prof is going to be generous to us so that we do not. Do you want to, because the computer is on that side. Do you want to give Prof your computer? You can bring yours so that we coordinate. Okay. Put presentation.
There one. So that's his presentation. No, that's Kenya.
Put presentation mode. Right. So we just see and coordinate how to.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning. Okay, it's my pleasure to have the presentation.
Let's do it this way, Prof. And you can just navigate it yourself. There you go.
It's my pleasure to have the presentation from Kenya. And just from yesterday, I was just thinking about some of things that we were discussing, and some ideas have come to my mind. So, it's okay? Some of the ideas that came to my mind is some of the blind spots we might have had, like Professor Marty has talked about. In fact, a short while ago, we have an emerging issue in Kenya over the boy child. And so we actually have to think about that as part of the research going forward, because some of us come from institutions that are actually, we call them pink, with a higher population of ladies, which is a good thing. But where what is happening, we have to go and check some of those areas there. So about this study, of course, the first thing we considered was to think about how to segregate the areas that we are going to collect this data from. And we consider the previous, we used to have 8 provincial centers, and we consider them as the best starting point given the resources. So we have those were centers, and of course, Prof. Matt, I remember very well, we might have been blinded by the fact what you are saying, near the tarmac and near so as part of the feedback I'm taking back to my team in Kenya is to see, were we blinded by that, or what we can be able to do to take care of that. So our key focus basically was to look at it in terms of the scale, quality, and nature of NPO contributions to youth employment, and basically special attention to marginalized youth and transitions to formal sector. Now, so we had close to 1,032 youth respondents, and we surveyed 165 NPOs and across the country. Now, the Kenyan context. First, we have a youth of between 15 and, if we look at the age group that was part of the survey, we're having 15 to 34, which actually is about 35% of Kenyan population. But we have our, given that it was country specific, we had to work with 18 to 34 because we could not be allowed to talk to those who are younger than that. So that was the first thing. And 83.6% of Kenyan total workforce is in the informal sector. So in fact, informality is the norm, not the exception. And so this research is very, very important because it tells us that our focus on non-profit organization will be very important because it's a key starting point in terms of this research aspect. And then 85% of the youth rely on informal work, and that's by a World Bank survey. And 53% of the employed youth are in terms of, they're actually in extreme poverty. So we have a job to be able to work to see how they can escape from poverty. Now, the government has set up what are called training institutions, which are really useful in trying to give these young people skills in terms of how they can be able to have a dignified kind of work in their future. So as a key important part, when we talked about marginalized youth, we talk about, one is geographic. We have the northern part, which are called arid and semi-arid areas. And then we have also informal settlements that have limited services. Then economic, we have ultra poor, no capital, no informal work, and therefore, precarious to informal work, and therefore, this is an area to be able to consider. And then social and political disability issues, gender discrimination, and of course, exclusion perspectives. So when we are looking at that perspective, when we focus on the dignified and fulfilling work, we went to look at, first of all, rights of work, adequate earnings, social protection, and then voice and representation, and then personal fulfillment. So apart from purpose, belonging, skills growth, in addition to income, we had to focus on purpose, belonging, and skills growth for this particular time. Yeah, so with that in mind, the design I'm sure you are very familiar with, so we'll not go through that part. I would want to focus on key aspects. Whom did we speak to? So male, you can see male, women, male, female is nearly the same, approximately 50%. Then single, we had 62 to 4%. We had those who are married. Then we had education level. You can see tertiary was about a third of that, and then secondary, another approximately that. Now, employment status, there are those in work, not working, and then formal contracts, and there are those with no contracts at all. Now, direct employment. So we had, there's a very important thing that comes up in Kenya especially. We have this way of starting with unpaid volunteers as a way. So we had to look at them. They were the majority. Some had formal contracts, no contract at all. So you are unpaid, but there's a contract that you are, I mean, that period of time. So it looks like an anomaly there. And then we had, on the other side, access group, we had those that are internally displaced. In Kenya, we have issues that arise often, and internally displaced people are some of the most affected. And then gender discrimination, we had men, women, and youth with disabilities are some of the access groups we are trying to target at that particular time. The ripple effect. If we look at the research, the youth benefit indirectly from NPOs through entrepreneurship programs. One of them was entrepreneurship, where there are about 7.9% received support. Training, 18.1 received support. Scholarship, so this scholarship that have a very high impact, because this is where the youth could be able to get some training to help them. And then, of course, microfinance for them to be able to start off on some of the projects that they can work on to be able to make a living. Inclusion, so gender parity, so direct employment, you can see there, nearly the same for both ladies and gentlemen. We had urban and rural areas, nearly the same, again. Internally displaced, most of them engaged by NPOs, conflict-affected youth, and gender discrimination. But there's a wider gap that remains. Youth with disabilities, and this is well marked in our research. Entrepreneurship for women versus men, that's a problem. Microfinance coverage, very low coverage, which is like an exclusion. Youth with chronic illnesses, and even this data was uneven, and is something that we can look at. And the other group there, yes, the other group, LGBT youth, the data was very sparse for us, okay? And maybe it's one of the things, maybe as you mentioned, we really have maybe to target going into the future. Now, we considered which groups in terms of fulfillment. So most sense of purpose and fulfillment, NPOs were doing very well there compared to non-NPOs. Opportunities to enhance, the same thing for NPOs. Ability to contribute to society, and then work reputation and was good, very good, and especially for NPOs compared to non-NPOs. Subsectoral, we find that culture and recreation was the most common, where many of these were. Education services, we had human health, social services, environmental protection, community development, civic advocacy. We found those were areas that employed a lot of people. In terms of dignity dimension, health and social services were where we had the best. Education, culture, recreation, and agriculture. Now, of course, again, that disability gap still comes up. So in terms of gender and geographic patterns, we had health. We had health and social services. Men preferred agriculture, social services, and then rural areas, most of the youth preferred to be engaged in agriculture. Who are the NPOs? And then we found most of the NPOs or NGOs or civil society organizations were the majority, but faith-based organizations were also up, and then we had things like social enterprises that were also part of the leading ones. Now, a major part was funding and leadership risks, where about 51% of the annual budget was below 6 million. I hope I will have put that in dollars. And then, of course, they relied mostly on international donors for primary funding, which means we had high dependency and low sustainability. So, and then and then another thing that affected us much was 2025 with the USAID funding issue. Then a lot has happened, and we'll be interested to follow up on what has happened after that, because most of the NGOs or NPOs, some of them were being supported by USAID. And then most of the, if you look at in terms of non-profit sector to the youth employment, untrained, we had unpaid trainees, as we said, internal employees, volunteers, and paid trainees. I think this is something that we have already mentioned. Now, inclusion, the COVID-19 had a big impact. Okay, 76% of the NPOs engaged in persons with disabilities during that particular time, and 77% engaged economically disadvantaged youth. And then COVID informal employments dropped during that particular time because of the issues. And then NPOs, track employment outcomes of program graduates is there, and that information can be found in the main document we have put up. What are the benefits? We looked at other key benefits, and we tracked down things like maternity leave, educational training, transport allowance, social security, and we could see in urban generally they were higher compared to rural areas, and NGOs were mostly higher compared to civil-based organizations. Subsectoral, I think this one I have already mentioned. Education services was highest in this regard, and in terms of dignified work, widest benefits were related to annual leave, social security, medical insurance, and then faith-based organizations were some of the best on formal benefits as opposed to others. While at the grassroots level, narrower benefits compared to those in urban areas. And if you look at, like I said, we have on the ground mostly agriculture-based, especially for the gentlemen. Agriculture-focused NPOs had the strongest in the rural reach as opposed to those that were away from those particular, especially in the town centers. What does this data tell us? Okay, NPOs contributes meaningfully to youthful livelihood, but direct employment reaches only 12%. Now, so indirect benefits are the key thing that is there for our data, because there's training, mentorship, entrepreneurship, and microfinance, which reach 70%, which means that the NPOs were a starting point for the youth to be trained so that they can get formal employment. So it's one. Then NPOs build dignity, not just jobs. So if you compare the data there, is that from there, and if we relate from the first point, it means that when they are now trained, they can form, they can easily join others. So they create dignified work, not just employment. Inclusion, we have gender parity there. You can see between men and women. Displaced youths were well served, but disability gaps were severe. And women trail in entrepreneurship, microfinance. Rural NPO capacity remains limited at about 52%, and NPOs depend on international donors for survival. What are the opportunities for youth employment in the sector? Scale indirect employment pathways. Okay, so you can see from there, there's a triple effect that reaches a ripple effect, sorry, that reaches 70% of the youth. So entrepreneurship support, satisfaction there, training, enhanced employability, microfinance, and then proven routes to employment, which targeted investment each that can be significantly expanded. 2, formalize volunteer and training pathways. So most of the 33% of the NPOs employed youth with unpaid volunteers. Like I said, this was common, but this one was a pipeline for formal employment, which is something that we marked. Another thing that areas like agriculture, civil advocacy, and digital services were areas that expand underserved subsectors. And then targeting marginalized groups for growth, internally displaced youth, conflict affected, and then demonstrate the highest for NPO engagement. And something that maybe came up yesterday, the issue about refugees is something that we might have been blind to, and we have marked that as one of the areas we're going to think about going forward. Now, we just thought about for maybe government or and then co-funded, maybe for example, integrate dignity metrics in labor, maybe policy, and support informal to formal transitions. As we said, most of the skills are obtained when people are in those areas. So is some of the areas that we will see policy-wise is a direction that we think of applying. So some of the recommendations we have, scale what works. So expand entrepreneurship programs, combining mentorship, finance, and shared workspaces, and then build paid traineeships. So you realize that it's a path for that. Expand inclusive programming, which you can include gender, disability, rural isolation, so that we can have these ones also involved. Co-design with employers. Some of the partners track employment outcomes and maybe work with some of these employers to see how well to be able to support this group. Leverage digital infrastructure. Kenya, generally our youth, a very higher percentage, even in this we found that they have access to a lot of these digital services. So maybe to see how we can enhance this so that we can be able to reach more. Diversify funding, because the funding that we have we saw is limited, and therefore this is an area, and targeted rural programs. Some of the areas that were affected were from rural areas. So our conclusions, qualitative deep down on what works. Basically, that means that some of the things that we have noted from yesterday and today, some of those areas will have a deep down. Post-COVID recovery and donor crisis trajectories. Since most of them were funded, we want to see what was the impact of that, so that we can be able to see how to relate that as an area to check. Impact of disaggregated NPO types, maybe CBOs, NGOs, FBOs, sector-wise, health, agriculture, education, geographic, basically rural, urban, and what types of NPOs deliver that most dignified outcomes at a scale. So that segmentation is key. Now, the disability part and then the inclusion, I think that's one area that we really need to do a deep dive, and we have planned for that. So thank you very much. I think that's what I had for.
Thank you, Prof, for your generosity. I see the philanthropy is working, but we need you to be more or sufficiently more philanthropic with time for the next speakers, so that we can save time, as we said yesterday. But Prof did well. I mean, you can already see that is a much better improvement from yesterday. So I would like to announce that we have been joined by one of our, keynote speakers, but I would like him to settle so that we can have the next conversation. We can have the Professor Lemu, Professor Lemu from University of Addis Ababa to come and present, and then immediately after Professor Lemu, then I will call him to come and give us a 10-minute keynote speaker. He's also promised to be sufficiently philanthropic with us. So, yeah. So, okay, Professor Lemu, please come through.
Good morning, everyone. This is Alemu from Addis Ababa University, and I'm presenting the quantitative draft report from the Ethiopian research team. The number of slides was very much so. Our team has selected systematically 1,486 user respondents and 82 NPOs for the quantitative survey. From the gender perspective, out of the total user respondents, 60% were female and 40 were male. So going directly to the contributions that the NPOs have been doing in Ethiopia, you see that the direct contribution remained very limited, and the indirect contribution was significant in various ways. The trend still repeats itself here in Ethiopia as well, because the indirect contributions are very much significant, and the NPOs in Ethiopia are not significant employers. Out of the limited direct contributions, the majority remained concentrated in urban areas, and out of the limited direct contributions, employment with direct contract remained 40%, and it is volunteer work with stipend, small stipend, where some of the observations having some attainments by the NPOs. We look at skills development program, vocational training, life skills training, women's leadership training. These are the skills development in the indirect category found to be very much significant. I think the youth were asked whether or not they were able to apply the skills they got from the skills development program, and the majority, about 78%, agreed that they have been applying the skills they acquired from the skills development. and they also feel that the skills development program has increased their employability, as you see from the picture here. They have been participated in trainings. About 80% agree that they have been taking part in various trainings. And they were in some form of work. About half of these were involved in own use production, and this is also a pattern similar to other country reports that we have seen yesterday and this morning. And the findings showed that most experience measured at the reported work duration, about 39, 1 to 3 years, meaning that they had a very brief experience in working with the NPOs. I think I better the analysis. You know, to combine the both the NPO and the use survey analysis, and there appears a mismatch between the number of young people seeking work in Ethiopia and the capacity of NPOs to provide direct employment. So we have lots of young people seeking various types of supporters from the NPOs, but the NPOs capacity remain limited. That is an observation. The NPOs employ with prioritizing youth-focused programming, but only a small proportion of young respondents reported to have secured direct employment. So this is the structural reality of the country. The population exceeds the employment of the NPOs there. So, but despite this, the NPOs indirectly engage the youth through trainings, livelihood initiatives, entrepreneurship support, mentorship, financial services, and the like. These indirect engagements contribute significantly to the youth employability, confidence, and income generating capacity. For many young respondents, NPOs were not just service providers, but catalysts that helped them in their transition towards securing more dignified and fulfilling work, even when such work was not directly within the NPOs themselves. So youth beneficiaries' involvement in NPO support programs often enhances their sense of agency, independence, and self-worth as key contributors of fulfilling. So many young people associated the skills and resources provided by NPOs with increased purpose in their economic activities and greater about the future. So this demonstrates that even when NPOs are not direct employers, they contribute meaningfully to the conditions in which dignified and fulfilling work becomes possible. A central theme emerging in the study is that NPOs contribute to youth employment through multiple interconnected pathways. While direct employment remains limited, young people are widely benefiting from NPOs supporters that in turn help them build access employment opportunities. So these include entrepreneurship development, capital, skill trainings, and support for self-employment. And most youth beneficiaries reported that training, mentorship, provided by the NPOs enabled them to establish micro and small enterprises. Many now earn income through self-employment in such as services sector, agriculture, small-scale production. So we have observed that while the NPOs themselves in a profit-making sector, they to get engaged into the market. So they are enablers and they are promoters of market inclusion of the youth. So through these mechanisms, NPOs create an enabling environment in which young people build dignified long terms. This has a contribution the understanding of the role of the non-profit sector. So NPOs are not merely employers, they are facilitators of youth. And NPOs support equips young people with practical tools, confidence, opportunities to navigate the labor market, exercise agency, and participate meaningfully in life. For many respondents, this support translated into work that feels purposeful, productive, and satisfaction. You see about 48.9% got access to the workspace. Mentorship remained limited, only 8, but financial support was found to be 3.9, 22%, but all them are combined together in giving us a sense how this is enabling the youth to get some form of participation, particularly in developing their own livelihood. And NPOs provide holistic packages of entrepreneurship support. We have seen this one very well. So in the Ethiopian context where formal employment remains saturated and structurally limited, entrepreneurship represents a viable and meaningful route into work that aligns with the aspirations of young people for autonomy, growth, and dignity. So, perspective was increasingly recognized entrepreneurship as a strategic pathway for promoting decent and fulfilling work, and they are essential resources to the achievement as well. In any program, which they describe it as practical, relevant, and directly useful for their work or for their business activity. These programs cover a broad range of competencies, including technical skills, business management, communication skills, and life skills. Many young respondents believe NPOs provide training their opportunity to gain market relevant skills that could lead to dignified and fulfilling. So reliability, but also helps them build confidence, improve problem solving abilities, and develop a stronger sense of purpose in activities. Like significant access to NPOs between urban and rural youth, because most NPOs are concentrated in urban areas. Rural youth face limited access to training, entrepreneurship support, and financial assistance. This is a pattern consistent to other country experiences that we had yesterday as well. Because most NPOs are this unequal distribution limits rural youth ability to pursue and as a market. So this disparity reflects broader socioeconomic inequalities. Ethiopia, to livelihood. But this is the point that I would like to remind as well, that those youth migrated into the urban centers, the NPOs are also acting as an actor of transition or livelihood transition. So the rural landless youth who are able to migrate to the nearby urban centers are nurtured to different paths to livelihood, and that is how NGOs are acting livelihood transitors. So expanding NPO's program into rural areas would therefore be critical, not only for employment outcomes, but also for improving the overall quality and dignity of work available to rural youth. One of the notable strengths of the non-profit sector is its commitment to supporting marginalized youth, including young women, youth with disabilities, single moms, orphans, and economically disadvantaged groups. These populations often experience acute barriers to accessing decent, fulfilling employment due to social exclusion, discrimination, and structural inequalities. The NPO's interventions help reduce these barriers by offering targeted training, financial assistance, psychosocial support, and employment opportunities. Many marginalized youth reported that any in work more secure, more dignified, and more aligned with their abilities and goals. For these young people, the non-profit sector often serves as a bridge into economic participation and social inclusion. The nature of work with the NPO sector presents a complex picture. Many youth employed by NPOs under short-term or project-based contracts may face feelings of job security and development problem. While these roles often permanence, dignity, and fulfillment. So NPOs emphasize decent work standards by providing fair treatment, training opportunities, supportive work environment, and benefits such as leave, social protection, and mentorship. With youth who worked with NPOs frequently highlighted the professional development opportunities, supportive relationships, and sense of purpose associated with such roles. The challenges for the sector lies in balancing the flexibility demanded by project-based funding with the need to promote stable, dignified, and fulfilling employment for the youth. This tension underscores the need for the innovative, sustainable human resource practices within the Ethiopian non-profit sector. The integrated analysis again reveals several gaps between youth expectations and capabilities of the NPOs. Young people expressed strong aspirations for stable employment, long-term career development, higher education, and structured opportunities for advancement. So these expectations often exceed what NPOs can offer given their resource constraints, project cycles, and organizational mandates. So the scale of youth unemployment in Ethiopia far outpaces the resources available within the non-profit sector. To summarize, I think the indirect pathways dominate over direct NPO employment. Only a small share of youth report indicated that youth were directly employed by NPOs. Youth participation in training, enterprise support, financial services were widespread, which are reported to be connected with work creation, mainly self-employment or small-scale hiring. This proves the NPOs are more employment enablers than direct employers. So entrepreneurship support is particularly salient, commonly reported are mentorship, incubation, startup assistance, which is associated with enterprise initiation and expansion. So these were sustained, and these pathways line up with elements of dignified work, such as purpose, recognition, and income reliability through durability varies. Unequal access by geography and status, urban youth are more likely to access high-value services such as microfinance, advanced training, or enterprise support. Access is often limited to protective or basic services among marginalized groups, while underrepresentation in transformative economic programs indicates targeting and design gap with equity implications. So job quality concerns in NPO employment, while youth directly employed by NPOs report strong intrinsic motivation and social value, they also report income insufficiency and instability, an integral incongruity that requires the sector to model dignified employment standards. I think this is also a point that we observed from yesterday's presentation. Sectoral bridges with coordination gaps. NPO's activities concentrate in education, social services, community and economic development, to a lesser extent agriculture and health. So this dispersion underlies the need for serious attention to be paid toward aligning services with market demand and equipment pipelines. The comparative advantage of NPOs has to do with enabling rather than supplying youth employment. So their most significant value add is improving human and financial capital models that integrate market-relevant training, mentorship, and finance result in improved employment-related outcome more consistently than standalone services. So equity gaps, especially urban bias, need to be addressed along with better inclusion of marginalized youth in transformative programs for effectiveness and equity reasons. So improving job quality within the NPOs themselves to credibly advance dignified work norms,
la mise à disposition d'une lettre de recommandation, la mise en relation avec les points focaux. Et le travail que nous faisons, c'est pour les décideurs politiques qui mettent en œuvre nos recommandations et les organisations non gouvernementales. Donc nous avons la chance d'avoir le président de l'organisation faîtière des organisations à but non lucratif du Sénégal. Donc je vous prie bien vouloir profiter. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a hand to Mr. Yat.
Merci beaucoup, M. Si. Donc, mesdames, messieurs, les représentants du CAPSI et de l'université Witwatersrand, j'espère que j'ai bien prononcé le nom de cette université. Monsieur le directeur général de ISDL, chers partenaires techniques et financiers, chers collègues des organisations de la société civile, distingués invités. Permettez-moi d'abord, au nom du CONGAD et en mon nom personnel, de vous renouveler nos remerciements pour cette invitation et de noter que la contribution des organisations à but non lucratif à la création d'emplois décents pour les jeunes en Afrique nous touche profondément car elle est au cœur même de nos missions. Le CONGAD a appuyé, comme l'a dit monsieur le directeur tantôt, la phase de collecte de données de cette étude, convaincu qu'une connaissance rigoureuse de notre action commune permet d'éclairer les politiques publiques, de renforcer les programmes existants et d'en inventer de nouveaux. Aujourd'hui, je ne vous parlerai pas des détails de comment l'étude a été conduite au Sénégal, ni des processus et autres, mais je voudrais tout simplement partager un peu sur ce que nous faisons en essayant de donner la parole à des représentants d'ONG qui sont au Sénégal. Ainsi, les organisations membres du CONGAD interviennent sur tout le territoire national dans des contextes parfois difficiles, mais avec une expertise profondément enracinée dans les réalités locales. Elles forment, insèrent, encadrent, accompagnent, financent, orientent et parfois même relèvent des jeunes qui avaient perdu tout espoir. À travers leurs initiatives, elles prouvent que l'emploi des jeunes n'est pas seulement une question économique, c'est une question de dignité, de cohésion nationale et de développement durable. À leur ferme école agroécologique du centre Kaïdara de Fimela, l'association Jardin d'Afrique s'est inspirée du conte d'Amadou Ampateba pour former de jeunes ruraux qui deviennent des fermiers agroécologiques autonomes, des ambassadeurs de l'agroécologie dans leur commune, des créateurs d'emplois locaux. Les jeunes obtiennent un capital technique, semencier, animalier et financier, mais aussi un terrain attribué par la communauté grâce à un comité local de suivi. C'est un modèle durable, reproductible, profondément endogène, qui met les jeunes au centre de la transition écologique. L'Union pour la solidarité et l'entraide, au centre Amadou Malik Gaye, plus connu à Dakar sous l'appellation Centre de Bok, forme des jeunes issus des milieux très vulnérables dans des métiers comme l'électricité, la plomberie, la délégation médicale, l'informatique, et leurs résultats parlent d'eux-mêmes. 93% de réussite pour les apprenants présentés aux examens. Une collaboration active avec le 3FPT qui prend en charge 90% des coûts de formation pour certains jeunes. Des centaines de jeunes mobilisés autour d'activités sportives, éducatives et culturelles. L'USE démontre qu'avec une formation bien adaptée, des jeunes souvent marginalisés deviennent des travailleurs compétents et recherchés. Le réseau africain pour un développement intégré, RADI, a mis en place dans plusieurs régions du Sénégal, à Fatick, Kaffrine, Kolda, Saint-Louis, Thiès notamment, des programmes d'une ampleur remarquable. Formation sur les thématiques agricoles, la gestion, le marketing, constitution de mutuelles et cellules d'épargne et de crédit, appui à la création d'entreprises rurales. Dans les départements de Podor, Kolda ou Thiès, ces projets ont permis la création de milliers d'emplois directs et indirects, touchant prioritairement des jeunes ruraux, souvent coupés du marché du travail. Ainsi, RADI montre que l'emploi des jeunes est viable dès lors qu'on investit dans les chaînes de valeur locales. Au centre d'apprentissage populaire d'Alpha-Dev, 50 jeunes ont été formés en 2024-2025, dont 80% de filles. On y a enregistré 91% de réussite dans la restauration, 56% dans la couture et 15 jeunes filles formées par ce centre en broderie numérique ont lancé une activité rentable de vente de nappes et de draps, entre autres articles. Une jeune fille formée en restauration a obtenu un contrat de travail dans une entreprise de sa localité et une autre en mécanique a effectué un stage de 3 mois au Canada, revenant avec un plan d'affaires pour créer son entreprise. En électricité, 2 filles titulaires d'un brevet d'études professionnelles avec mention bien poursuivent leurs études pour l'obtention d'un brevet de technicien. AlphaDev incarne ainsi la promotion socio-économique par les compétences avec un accent particulier sur le leadership féminin. Fordé à Kolda met en œuvre des stages d'adaptation professionnelle dans des domaines comme l'animation rurale, des formations pratiques engagées dans les communautés, des partenariats directs avec la direction de l'emploi permettant aux jeunes d'être rémunérés, encadrés, protégés socialement. Avec un dispositif contractuel clair, conforme au Code du travail et lié à la Convention nationale État-employeur. Fordé illustre la capacité des ONG à professionnaliser l'engagement communautaire et à offrir aux jeunes un premier emploi crédible dans leur propre région. Un autre exemple remarquable est celui de l'association Conseil pour l'action, ONG que je connais très bien et que je dirige d'ailleurs, qui illustre parfaitement que les ONG ne forment pas uniquement des techniciens ou des opérateurs, mais aussi des cadres et des experts capables de renforcer durablement les organisations publiques ou privées par des formations et un accompagnement des organisations publiques comme des entreprises privées. On a pu renforcer leur gouvernance financière, leur maîtrise des coûts et la qualité de leurs services, ce qui consolide des centaines d'emplois dans ces organisations. Ce que j'ai dit tantôt pour ASEA comme pour les ONG précédemment citées est aussi valable pour beaucoup d'ONG que le temps ne permet pas de mettre en lumière dans cette communication. Elles offrent toutes des stages et forment des cadres qu'on retrouve dans différents secteurs d'activité socio-économique du pays. Ces initiatives nous enseignent plusieurs vérités essentielles. Les jeunes ne manquent ni de talent, ni de volonté. Ils manquent d'opportunités structurées. L'insertion réussie naît de l'accompagnement, de la proximité, du suivi, de la formation pratique. On y apprend que les ONG sont des passeurs. Elles transforment la vulnérabilité en potentiel. L'emploi des jeunes est indissociable du développement local. Et autre enseignement, c'est que les modèles d'insertion doivent être enracinés dans les réalités territoriales. Ainsi, en capitalisant sur l'étude présentée, le CONGAD formule 3 recommandations majeures. Les ONG génèrent des milliers d'emplois. Elles savent faire. Ce qui leur manque, ce sont des mécanismes financiers pérennes, décentralisés, accessibles. Deuxième recommandation, c'est de reconnaître pleinement le rôle des ONG comme co-acteurs de la politique nationale de l'emploi. Nous demandons une meilleure intégration dans les programmes nationaux d'insertion, les réformes de formation professionnelle, les dispositifs de financement de l'auto-emploi. Et troisièmement, c'est de soutenir l'innovation sociale dans les territoires. Agroécologie, pisciculture numérique, artisanat, transformation locale. Les ONG innovent sans bruit, mais avec un impact massif. Mesdames et messieurs, les chiffres de l'étude CAPSI SDL ne sont pas simplement des statistiques, mais aussi des histoires, des familles, des communautés transformées. Ces réussites-là ne se mesurent pas seulement en chiffres, elles se mesurent aussi en sourire, en dignité retrouvée, en famille mieux nourrie, en enfants mieux scolarisés. Elles se mesurent dans la fierté des parents, dans le respect gagné, dans la certitude que oui, ici au Sénégal, il est possible de réussir sans partir. Le CONGAD réaffirme aujourd'hui son engagement total qui est d'être l'allié des politiques publiques, le partenaire fiable des initiatives internationales. Ensemble, faisons de l'emploi des jeunes non pas une promesse, mais une réalité quotidienne dans nos territoires. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup à Monsieur le Président du Conseil d'administration du CONGAD, que je vous demande d'applaudir à nouveau. Translator, yeah.
To help people understand how some of these things are working. Some of the gadgets are difficult to operate.
Some of them?
Yes, the translation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They don't know how they are working.
Ok. Bon, apparemment, il y a quelques participants qui ont des difficultés pour utiliser les casques. Donc, Donc c'est juste pour interpeller si c'est au niveau de la traduction, si c'est au niveau des techniciens de la traduction. Oh. The fact is, the man who's supposed, the technician who's supposed to manage the whole stuff is out. Yeah, you have to be frank. I mean, sorry for that. So, merci beaucoup encore une fois à Monsieur le Président du CONGAD pour cette belle présentation qui illustre, si besoin en était, le rôle fondamental que jouent les ONG. Et je pense qu'on a eu des exemples d'illustration. Et le plus intéressant pour moi, c'est les leçons apprises, ce qui a été capitalisé. Et je suis sûr que c'est des expériences qu'on peut partager dans d'autres pays. Et il y a également des recommandations au niveau politique, au niveau opérationnel. Et nous, en tout cas, en tant qu'Institut de développement local, nous allons voir un peu comment capitaliser tout cela, l'intégrer dans le rapport. Et je rappelle juste au Président que pour le moment, nous sommes juste à la phase quantitative. La phase qualitative va suivre avec les récits de vie, avec les témoignages et autres éléments qui vont illustrer le rôle éminemment important que jouent les organisations à but non lucratif. Merci à tout le monde. Vous n'êtes pas là pour m'écouter. Je m'éclipse pour laisser la place au prochain présentateur.
Yeah, that's called skilled labor. Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think our interest of keeping time still is working well. We are going to have a presentation from Rwanda, and then immediately after that we'll have a short break. Then we come back to do the last few ones, and then we'll have to discuss the three presentations so far. Thank you. Yes, so we have been joined by more of our hosts, especially the umbrella bodies. Apart from the CONGAD, we are also joined by the representative of the National Youth Council. I wasn't aware of this until this minute, but I think it's only good for us to always be receptive to the hosts that they're here to welcome us. So, Dr. John Pierre, I'm sorry we're going to disrupt you a little bit, but we just have to ask the representative of the National Youth Council to take 2 to 3 minutes, please, so that we end up saving time, just to say hi. And this is a youth-oriented project, and I think that would be a very good constituency not to lose. Okay, thank you so much. Just 1 to 2 minutes, and then then we invite back Dr. John Pierre.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup. Merci à ISDL de nous convier à cette activité. Bonjour, doyen du CONGAC. Je réponds au nom de Mohamed Gorgiseni Kamara. Je suis membre du Conseil national de la jeunesse du Sénégal et président du conseil d'arrondissement de la jeunesse des Almadies. D'abord, remercier ISDL de nous convier à cette activité qui montre toute l'importance que font les organisations de jeunes par rapport au développement. Et aujourd'hui, ce qui nous regroupe ici, en fait, permet de capitaliser ce que nous sommes en train de faire. J'ai l'habitude de dire, nous, les organisations, que ce soit les organisations de jeunes ou toute organisation à but non lucratif, faisons beaucoup de choses, notamment par rapport à l'emploi des jeunes, à travers nos projets et nos programmes. au-delà même du Conseil national de la jeunesse du Congat, au Sénégal, il y a d'autres associations assez impactantes qui recrutent 20 à 30 personnes au sein même de leur organisation à travers plusieurs projets et programmes. Et d'habitude, quand on capitalise l'emploi au Sénégal, ces emplois ne sont pas capitalisés parce que c'est des emplois dus à des projets de 5 ans ou de 4 ans et qui ne sont pas souvent enregistrés quand on capitalise l'emploi dans certains secteurs ou dans certaines thématiques. Et aujourd'hui, nous-mêmes qui faisons le plaidoyer pour l'emploi des jeunes, nous-mêmes qui faisons le plaidoyer pour la participation des jeunes, nos propres emplois ne sont pas souvent capitalisés quand on donne des chiffres et des données. Donc, je magnifie carrément cette initiative qui vise carrément à montrer ce que nous sommes en train de faire, à capitaliser ce que nous sommes en train de faire en tant que des organisations à but non lucratif. Et je pense que cette étude va permettre à l'État, aux acteurs de développement de mieux soutenir, parce qu'au-delà même de demander aux autres de créer de l'emploi, nous-mêmes, on peut créer de l'emploi à travers nos projets et nos programmes de développement. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, thank you. I think our aim to be generous with time is working. So, Dr. John Pierre, please take the stage.
Yes, good morning. Yeah. Yes. Sorry for that. I'm here to present the findings from our side as IPA Rwanda. So I will try to be generous as previous presenters. So I will take you all these concepts. They look many, but I will try to manage. Yeah. Youth employment, as we know, it's a big challenge worldwide. And to create a dignified and fulfilling job for youth requires strong partnership from government, private sector, and non-profit sectors. A report from our National Institute of Statistics said that about 27% of Rwandan population are youth. And the total youth with unemployment rate is 14.1% as of 2025. And informal sector dominates our employment sector with 90%. So our government is trying as much as possible to create dignified and fulfilling work. So it has made commendable progress with the partnership with private sector, but still the contribution of LPOs is still not documented well. So the purpose have been spoken by previous presenter. I will not say anything, even the objectives are common. But if we come to Rwandan context, youth are considered as persons aged 16 to 30. So marginalized group or youth have been spoken by others, and it seems to be common. Work also has been spoken by others, and but according to Rwandan youth, work is not defined just by income, but also by the distance of the job.
Also for dignified and fulfilling work, we based on MasterCard Foundation's dimensions. There are 4. And MasterCard have tried to engage our government so that they can consider these 4 dimensions in the working framework in Rwanda. So they are engaging our government so that they can adopt those 4 dimensions. So design and methodology, they look common. But let's go straight forward to findings. So according to the findings, this is from youth survey, most respondents were, the majority were between 25 and 35. And about the gender, female dominated compared to male with 52.43%. And according to geographical location, urban respondent seems to be more compared to rural. Marital status, a big number of them were single because their youth not yet get married, followed by married monogamy. Many of them were Christian and a few Hindu and Buddhist. What I can say here, we have also traditional religion, maybe for others which are not listed there, are maybe for traditional religion. Level of education, many of them attended the upper secondary followed by primary. And whether they engage in the work, 740 youth among the sample size. I have not mentioned the sample size, but our sample size was 1,154 youth, and for NPOs were 116. So more than half are engaged in any form of work. And mainly those who are involved in any form of work, they are employed without a contract, representing 60%, more than 60%. Work experience, there are or a big proportion is between 1 to 3 years of experience. So income, a big number of them who are engaged in any work, so a big percentage are earning income. But their income are mainly less than $200 US. That is equivalent to 208,100 francs. So direct contribution, this is the youth employed by NPOs directly. So they represent 5%, while 95% did not get chance to be employed by NPO directly. Direct contribution by demographic and marginalization. So you can see that a big number of by age, a big number who are being direct employed represent the age of age between 25 and 35. According to gender, male dominate female. By geographical location, as previous presenters said, urban dominates always. And according to marginalization, those youth who have been employed by NPOs reported that they lack loan service. This is access to collateral, and followed by access to education. About disability, we didn't get chance to have any youth who were employed by NPO directly. So disability was 0. And current status of residents, fortunately we have one refugee who was employed by NPO among those 56 who were employed. 56 represent 5%. Those who were considered as who were considered as with chronic illness, represent 3.7%. So the good news is that we have seen that 14.3 of those employed by NPOs in Rwanda were having criminal record. So this to break barrier on any criminal record or whatever situation. So among those, one was convicted more than once. So that was really catching up. So let's go to indirect contributions. For indirect contribution, I will be just quick as possible. So this will be categorized in all those indirect contributions that we have seen before: entrepreneurship, education, microloans, and so forth. So among 1,116 youth, only 55 have got support, entrepreneurship support from NPO, and mainly was for entrepreneurship regarding financial assistance. And we go ahead, we ask if those entrepreneurship support have helped them to create job. So 49 out of 55 respond that it has helped them to create a job. So whether they are satisfied with that entrepreneurship support as an intervention received, so many of them said they are satisfied, and that is 8%. About training and capacity building, 132, you see it is bigger than the entrepreneurship support. So 132 among the total respondents reported that they have participated in any training regarding capacity building. And that one was mainly for vocational, apprenticeship, followed by vocational training. So that's entrepreneurship support has helped them to enhance self-employability, as 82 youth representing 62 have confirmed that it helped them to enhance self-employability. And also they confirm that the skills they learn from there, they are applying them to their daily business. So in terms of education as intervention, so only 65 received such kind of intervention, and this intervention has created high impact, as we can see that they said it has created high impact for them, 43, which is 66%. And impact was in many of them said was in terms of securing dignified and fulfilling work. Microloans, yes, 28 have received interventions. That is 2 points. Actually, this part is the lowest one, 2.43%. To mention if that was effective, so 22 among 28 confirmed that it was effective. In terms of microloans, if it has enabled them to be able to employ themselves or to employ others. So they said mainly was for acquisition of equipment. So to go ahead and see if the income is dignified, many respondents say that it is not reliable. Their income is not reliable. As you can see, about 54% said the income is not reliable, and even sufficient, the salary was not sufficient. So by respect, because respect is among the 4 dimensions, so mainly respondents will say they are very respected, and few of them or none of them have said they are not respected at workplace. Even they go ahead, they said they are respected by community, they are respected by supervisors, a big number of them, they are respected by their supervisors, by colleagues, the same scenario, beneficiaries or customers, it is the same also. They mentioned that they are sometimes or always and often respected. The youth have responded that many of them that the work given by NPOs provide a sense of purpose and fulfillment. As we can see, all the four variables indicate that the work given has provided a sense of purpose and fulfillment. On perception, what is the dignified income? Maybe this is a lack of experience, as said by colleague from Nigeria yesterday. Many of them respond that the dignified income is between $200 and $399. It may be lack of experience, and followed by the dignified salary is less than 200. So, so provision of work benefits. This one, NPOs do a lot in provision of this work benefit, and mainly dominated by social security contribution, because this is a must in Rwanda. So if you have to have, even if part-time job, you have to pay this social contribution for workers. So the government enforced that law. And what I have realized that is that urban NPOs do a lot, add more benefit like meals and transportation allowance compared to rural. So if you have participated in any personal NPO program to help them transition from informal to formal. So we saw that entrepreneurship and financial literacy has played a big role in making youth translate from informal to formal. And that transition or that program was very effective, according to the report. To ask if the youth are aware about the digital skills within the NPO sector. So a huge number said they are not aware of that, because 88% of the respondents, they said they are not aware about that. Subsector contribution we have seen that community and economic development did a lot in terms of subsector contribution, followed by agriculture. Reliability of the income from this sector of work, many of them, they said the income is not reliable. A big percent of them said they are not reliable. Sufficiency also, they said their income are not sufficient in their working sector. So this was for if the work, this one has been spoken. Am I going back? Yes, this one have been spoken, that the contribution are being recognized by society. They have confirmed that. Also, let's go to the finding of NPOs. The type of NPOs were dominated by faith-based organizations and non-governmental organizations. That is, those are NGOs. Location, more of them, these NPOs were from urban, and level of operation mainly are national, are on national level. Primary sector of working of these NPO mainly are social services, and required if they have registration document, of if they have registered with government. 102 among 116 confirmed that they are registered. Those which are not registered are 14, representing 12%. Many of these NPOs operate at a budget less than 70. That is less than $47 US, 47,000 US dollar. It's about 53. So they are operating at that less than that budget. The mean for budget for youth employment was 46. It's quite huge. Major source of income, many of them, they are international, they rely on international donors, representing 33.6%, and followed by individual donation. And man-led NPOs dominate with 94. This is 81%. These NPOs, many of them, they have board of directors. Now, contribution of non-profit sector to youth employment. So 17% of them confirm that they employ youth, while 83% they do not. Percentage of youth employed by type of NPOs, we can see that, and you have confirmed that faith-based organizations dominate, followed by non-governmental organizations. So average of number of youth within NPOs in the past 5 years, youth employees within NPOs, the maximum number was 2,420, and many of them were volunteers. That is represent 42.7%, and formal employment within gender, they are almost the same, but men slightly exceed women. And this one, okay. So for post-COVID, what I can say, before post-COVID, youth employment were on that record, but during COVID, it slightly goes down, decline, and rebounds afterward, after COVID. So after COVID, you can see that it is almost the same as previous, before COVID. But in COVID, for both men, across all sectors, reduced. So, this one is spoken. So I have said NPOs confirm that they provide a number of benefits to youth, whether personal, social, and skills. So let me go straight forward to conclusion. About the contribution of non-profit sector to youth employment, youth quantitative results indicated that a substantial number of youth have been directly employed, worked with NPOs in Rwanda. Youth have indirectly received support or interventions from NPOs. They confirm that, according to the finding. However, the finding revealed that most of NPOs created jobs are short to medium term. I mean, these represent no job security. And about conclusion of dignified and fulfilling work, you've confirmed that they are respected, their work are repeatable, and they are being recognized by the society, but still the income is not sufficient and not even reliable. In terms of subsector contribution, so the results show that NPO operating in education and skills development met the strongest distribution to youth employability and long-term career prospect. These organizations provide vocational training, soft skills, and certification that enhance youth competitiveness in the labor market, often leading to subsequent employment beyond non-profit sector. Health and social protection also show a significant contribution to dignified and fulfilling work, community-based roles such as peer educators, community health workers, and social mobilizers with limited financial compensation. A subsector contribution to dignified agriculture and the environment and climate action provides employment opportunity compared to other sectors. And particularly these ones are relevant for rural districts. And advocacy and governments-oriented NPO engage fewer youth in paid roles, but contribute to fulfilling work. In terms of internship, volunteering, leadership development, which can be done by youth with other alternative source of income, because you can't go in for volunteering where you will not see the income. So you have to have another alternative source of income. For NPOs, the large majority of surveyed NPOs reported employing young people, generally. And volunteering constitutes a primary entry point. So you start with volunteering, and at the end of the day, you get be employed by these NPOs. And COVID-19 have shown a noticeable disruptive effect on youth employment, but rebounds afterward. NPO provides a range of work benefits, and urban-based NPOs tend to be having a large range of benefits compared to rural. This one have spoken it. Income have been reported to be inadequacy, and employment stability remain persistent challenge for Rwandan youth. Agriculture stands out to be the most significant in terms of youth transition from informal to formal, followed by social service and culture. So recommendation. One of the recommendation is that there have to be a strengthened policy recognizing of NPOs, recognition of NPOs by formally integrating them into national employment strategies, because many NPOs reported that they are not aware about the employment status of their beneficiaries who pass there. So there have to be a designed labor market information system that capture data on direct and indirect youth employment generated by NPOs, disaggregated by age, gender, location, and type of work. So we have to enhance institutional collaboration by establishing a multi-stakeholder platform, linking government institution, non-profit sector organization, development partners, private sector, and youth representative. Also, another recommendation, we have to promote sustainable employment pathway by encouraging long-term market-linked and scalable non-profit intervention with clear exit and sustainable strategy. Why? Because these non-profit sectors offered a short-term contract. What is our proposed future research direction? Is that they have a build of strong partnership between the government, private sector, and non-profit sector to support sustainable youth employment in Africa, because these NPOs lack enough funds to sustain the employment of these youth. Another one is to examine policy barriers affecting non-profit sectors' effort to reduce informal youth employment in Africa, because many countries have reported that these youth are being employed in informally. So there have to be policies and barriers that affect these non-profit sector to sustainably employ youth. Murakoze cyane. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we're still doing well with the time, given the various speakers who have come in here. It's emerging clear that there are those commonalities, but we also get the points of divergences from all the presentations that we are getting. And thank you, Dr. John Pierre, because definitely, Prof. Marty, when we teach research methods, we usually encourage students that you need to be generous to the future researchers or researchers by proposing what is left, the areas that need to be having deeper, dive. So thank you for those future research. I hope the research, high oct eyes are taking those one into account. So we're going to have a very limited break, let's say about 8 to 10 minutes. And I would like to invite colleagues back here exactly at 11:10. We are going to start at exactly at 11:10, and at 11:10 we are going to expect that for Professor Moses Okech from Makerere University is going to tell us the finding emerging from Uganda. Thank you. Just take a 10 minutes break and then we embark to finalize the remaining part. Thank you so much.
She's outside. Welcome back. We are going to have the presentation from Professor Okech. Professor Okech, if you don't mind, please join.
I come with my PC?
Yeah, then we can just connect.
Oh, I don't know if the battery is still.
Yeah, they should. They should.
It's blowing direct.
Just one housekeeping issue. It seems to be a bit cold for some of our delegates, and if it's possible, I don't know who's in charge of this, but if it's possible, could we add a little bit so that it's a little bit warmer than it is now? I don't know who can help us with that. Yeah. Your battery's dying, right?
Eh? I think they can sustain. Let me see how much I'm going to pay. Because I charged it full in the morning. Computer is on. Let me see.
But did you send it to us? So because
Yes,
if you sent it to us, then
Joseph. And that was my worry. No, only sent to Joseph. He told me
forward it to me. Forward it to me. So
okay. Okay, it says 1 hour.
Okay, then you're good to go.
Yeah, it might do. At times says 1 hour and it's 50 minutes. And where's the HDM connector?
It's
Right.
Time is up. So,
Save your time.
Colleagues, let's settle, please. Those by the door, let's settle, please, so that we can start. Just start.
we have similarities.
Very close. Almost the same. You'll be fluent.
Elegance. I like how you it's very hard for you just to speak French.
So hard.
Why for us who have been growing in French? It's easier to learn English.
Can I? Okay. I beg your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. I was told to be very generous with my time, and I think I'll intend to take just 10 minutes. That's possible. Right, so let's get the experience from Uganda in terms of the quantitative part of this study. We are looking at the contributions of the nonprofit sector to the creation of dignified and fulfilling work for young people. This is from Uganda. Makerere University is the partner over there. And I want to say that most of the findings are quite relatable. So if I'm going to skip over some of the slides, it's really in the interest of not boring you or saying the same thing over and over again. I also tried to do a redacted version of the original presentation we had prepared, especially yesterday when Dr. Uma told us to be really brief. I'm one of the key stakeholders who's interested in exploring a bit of Dakar. So just know I'm with you. Great. So I'll not dwell so much on the overview, but that is the plan. I just wanted to give a little bit about the context of Uganda. Just like the other African countries represented here, we've got a bulging population, youth population over there. In fact, our most recent census, which was conducted last year, indicates that Uganda now has a population of about close to 46 million people only. You know, in Africa, we value numbers, so we want more. Those who have more like Nigeria, you need to give us some skills, how you do it. But this big population presents both opportunities and challenges at the same time, because we are told that youth unemployment stands at about 16.1%, and I'm looking at the youth between the age groups of 18 to 35. That was the interest of this study. Approximately about 700,000 new people join the job market every year. So this is quite a challenge for the planners for national development. Now, this study was also interested in, again, looking at how access to quality jobs is being looked at by the youth. What is the experience of the young people? But also, what are the marginalities within this demographic? So that was one of the intentions of this study. So we wanted to gather some empirical evidence on the contribution of the non-profits to these issues by way of offering solutions, but also understand youth perceptions of economic opportunities around them. Our definitions of the youth, I've already stated the age group category, but this was imposed partly by what happened during the scoping exercise. Initially, we wanted to look at the youth as per the African Union definition of 15 to 30 or to 35. But then during the scoping, we realized that just like Rwanda, I think, realized that we'd run into a lot of ethical approval roadblocks. Talking to people below the age of 18 is not easy. The protocol is a little bit more rigorous, and yet the timing for this study was quite short. So we opted to go for 18 to 35. That was purposeful. But also looking at the marginalities, again, we looked at the MasterCard definition of youth on the margin, also blended with some conversations we had with stakeholders in the country prior to going out to the field. So let's look at the methodology that we used. Again, it's quite relatable, so I'll not go so much in depth, but I wanted to add here that for the youth survey, we first looked at all the NGOs. You know, we characterized all the NPOs, rather, in the country, and then we looked at the NPOs that work with young people throughout the country. Now, in so doing, we're able to stay a little bit more focused. So we had to go back to the national statistics, which already indicated that the youth between age groups of 18 to 35 constitute about 23% of the overall population. That's 10.7 million. So we used, of course, the Slovene formula, therefore, to generate our sample, which was close to 1,000. For the NPO survey, we were more intentional. So after generating those lists and stratifying in terms of those focused on working with young people, we looked at the formal and the non-formal NPOs to be more inclusive. And our target was to reach at least 200 NPOs. But as realities came to be, we only ended up with 144 NPOs surveyed. One of the reasons was that there was a lapse in time between the time we did the scoping and when we went out to the field, that the closure of USAID as a program happened, within that hiatus. So it was no wonder that when we went to the offices of some of these NPOs, they had actually closed. They are no longer there, and yet they were target of our focus. So methodologically, I think that was also quite an interesting experience of how dependent some of these NPOs are on foreign funding. Maybe some papers could be developed out of that. We're a bit mindful in terms of the inclusion criteria. We purposed to ensure that at least 10% of our respondents were youth on the margin, again based on the other criteria already talked about. A number of things happened before we went to the field, including, scoping. We already talked about that, translation of the tools into the major regional languages, just in case some of the youth respondents could not speak English. We went through a very rigorous ethics approval process, and also we did trainings for the enumerators. So once that was done, so overall, we conducted this survey in all the 4 major regions of Uganda. Of course, the majority of respondents came from the central region, also where the capital is located, followed by western Uganda, and then eastern, and then northern. Probably had a slightly fewer number, but the numbers were fairly comparable. There's not a very big disparity in terms of that. So what were the findings? As you can see, again, close related to findings from elsewhere, the majority of the youth participating in these interviews were between the age groups of 25 to 35. We tend to think that these are the youth who are now more aligned with the job market, considering how long it takes also to go through the formal schooling system. But that can also be debated when we go to qualitative research. So that was the pattern. Now, we tried to track and trace if at all there was any contribution that the non-profits make to youth employment. And you could look at or even reflect on what everybody has been saying on this podium for the last 2 days, that we look at direct employment, but also indirect contribution, but we're also intentional about the nature of work. There's a conversation going on now that sometimes what we call work is just precarity, people are just surviving. Again, these are things we really need to explore as we move further. So this quantitative research definitely gives us very useful data that can provoke us maybe to scale further, maybe to find out the reasons behind some of these indicators. So what do we find in terms of direct contribution to employment by NPOs? That about 73% of the youth nationwide report not receiving direct employment from NPOs. Our focus, of course, was in the last 5 years. there was more reported acknowledgement of these contributions from the northern part of the country, and the least acknowledgement from the western part of the country. Now you might wonder, so people think the northern part of the country is more disadvantaged. So are we trying to say that NPOs are very effective in targeting, like what Prof. Marty said yesterday, going away from the tarmac? So you might think this is a very positive finding, but it comes with a catch. We are saying that access to direct NPO jobs is uneven. The northern region has the highest access, which is almost 2 times more than the western, suggesting an uneven distribution of NPO resources. But you might also say that perhaps places that receive the least employment from NPOs might have other economic alternatives. This is it's something that at least exists in anecdotal data and the gray literature, but could be probed further. In terms of the nature of work that the NPOs are seen to be more impactful in advancing, again, the sectors are similar to what a number of countries reported here: the human health services, professional and social services. Of course, when we talk about health services, it's not like very high-end jobs NPOs are providing. You look at things like what volunteers do. We have in Uganda some people called the village health teams. These are really, you could say, parallel structures that work at community level to link communities with health systems. Normally they look out for unemployed young people who are willing to take very little pay, sometimes even no pay for a long time, to play that role. For the young people, of course, this is like a stepping stone into the job market, so they can easily jump into it. So this data confirms a shift towards a service economy for the youth, even within the non-profit sector, emphasizing care-based and skill administration roles. We say here, even within the non-profit sector, because already this trend is seen in other aspects of the economy. Previously, young people used to be the main players in agriculture. But those of you who have been to Uganda, or especially to Kampala and the other big cities, you realize that a lot of young people are really in the service industry, especially the transport, motorcycle, what we call the border sector. And these are people who used to till the land, grow food, but there's that growing disillusionment with agriculture among young people. Yet we hear from other country findings that a lot of youth are working in the agricultural sector. So this conversation is really interesting as we go for qualitative data collection. When it comes to indirect contribution, we see NPOs playing a more significant role in terms of enabling youth work indirectly than through direct hiring. Somebody asked a question yesterday of how we determined in this study what we refer to by direct and indirect contribution of NPOs. I think direct is very easy really to assess in terms of if someone is directly or has been given a job by an NPO and is being paid or supported by the NPO. But at these other indirect contributions where something that the NPO is doing in the community has got a ripple effect out of it, which young people perhaps also create their own employment. So that kind of conversation. And we see that the youth are receiving indirect support, especially in skills or capacity building linkages. So again, we need to look at the regional disparities. Is it because of the same reasons that we stated before, or is there something else that is happening here? In terms of entrepreneurial support, we find that mentorship is the universal cornerstone of entrepreneurial support, but access to tangible resources still vary. For instance, we find that in terms of the support needed for entrepreneurship, mentorship and coaching is the main thing. But then financial assistance, direct financial assistance like credit access and so on is quite low. So while mentorship is consistently high everywhere, access to financial assistance and workspace is probably the weakest. So again, this is something that needs interrogation further. So in terms of contribution to dignified and fulfilling work, again, of course, there are the 4 indicators that we used in this study. So I tried to skip all those specific slides, but we say overall, about 26.8% out of the respondents surveyed acknowledge that NPOs provide them with dignified and fulfilling work. In terms of the age differential, again, we see a similar parallel with other country experiences that the youth, the older youth, what we call the older youth, actually reporting more support from the NPOs, those between 25 to 35 years. We might say that this could be due to focusing on employability, skills, vocational training, or entrepreneurship programs that target individuals which are normally past the basic schooling age. While this might make a lot of sense, we might need to probe even further, because some of these young people have actually not gone to school. So why does the statistics still maintain at that level? So we can all see that really a deeper qualitative conversation is imminent in this area. In terms of the gender parity, gender differential, there's near parity with a very slight difference between male and females or men and women reporting receiving jobs from the NPOs. Now this might suggest that on aggregate, NPOs contributions are not significantly gendered or not biased towards the gender perspective of direct work provision. But this could be due to limitations within quantitative design that doesn't probe for deeper issues. Yesterday, the gender expert was just telling us some of the nuances that we may need to explore. So this is a very significant finding. And we have also listened to other country presentations that talk about 51, 52% difference, 51, 49, and so on, which is quite close. Now, the extent to which this is a reality probably could be probed further. Geographically, again, we see a surprising rural advantage that there's more NPO presence or effectiveness in providing access to employment in the rural areas. But again, this is something that we may need to look into much closer. This is potentially due to the fact that there's already a lot of underemployment and unemployment in the rural sector. So the NPOs maybe find more relevance in operating in those geographics. In terms of disability, we see a complex variation. On aggregate, the youth who acknowledge living with disabilities acknowledge that, about 29% acknowledge that NPOs contributed to their employability. And this was indirectly, really, not directly. This was quite interesting because you might ask a question whether, because people living with disability are normally the most underprivileged. They're usually left out. Does it mean that there's something very surprising happening in this context?